just realized I didn't have coffee with me, and it just made me feel sad. Made me feel sad. Okay, so we are diving right in, continuing with what I'm just calling Paul's testimony, sharing his story from the road to Damascus. We've heard it before back in chapter 9, but now we're moving forward. And he tells the story 2 times, this time and yet one more time. And so in verse 9, it says, "Those who were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me." Now, verse 9 is a good verse for you Christians. I'm talking about Susan. I'm talking about my dad. I'm talking about that third person. I don't know who you are yet, but as your names pop up. Apologetics. 2 times ago, Paul's giving a defense, that word apologia in verse 1 of chapter 22. It's important for us to either know the answers or to have a full confidence that we can tell others there are answers. You guys don't need to memorize every one of these little things, but knowing the answers are out there are helpful. And you can tell people with confidence, hey, I don't remember how this works, but I know there's an answer. I can go get it for you and I'll be right back. And so verse 9, now if we flip back to Acts chapter 9, we're going to see what looks like a contradiction. And this is something that a friend recently even brought up. And I was happy that she did, because it made me go back and remember, because even I knew there was an answer, but I couldn't remember exactly how it played out. And I wasn't really prepared for this today. I didn't plan on this. So chapter 9 is on the road to Damascus. And it says, okay, verse 7, chapter 9, verse 7, same story, right? But this is the initial account. It says, "The men who journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no one." Now, over here, we had in chapter 22, verse 9, it says, "And those who are with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, and they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me." So did they hear a voice, or did they not hear a voice? And the key word here is that word for sound. It's phonos. Good morning, Steve. And so it's a word. Typically the Greek language is very specific, and that's actually one of the reasons why we're thankful that God and his sovereign plan decided to write the New Testament in Greek, because the words usually are very specific. But the problem with that word phonos is that it can mean a variety of things. And so Revelation, I know it's in Revelation, and maybe verse 11? No, chapter 1, they're describing Jesus. Here we go. Verse 15. So this is just some using the Bible to help better understand the Bible. In Revelation 1:15, describing Jesus in all of his glory, it says his feet were like fine brass, if refined in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. Now, what it's saying in the Greek there is his phonos is like the phonos of many waters. There's actually no different word for voice versus sound in the Greek. It's just obvious that if a human is making a sound, well, then the word phonos means voice. But if it's an object making a sound, then it's just a sound, if that makes sense. So back here in Acts 22, verse 9, where it says, "But they did not hear the voice of him who spoke." Back in chapter 9, verse 7, right? "The men stood speechless, hearing a phonos, but seeing no one." A better translation, and I hate saying better, like I know better than these guys, but I'm just saying, because there's no person, right? They saw no one, but technically they heard a phonos. It's a sound. It didn't say his voice. It just says they didn't hear a sound. And the idea, It says they hear a sound. Hearing a sound, but seeing no one. And verse 9 of chapter 22, it says they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. So the idea is that the men could hear something. They see the light. They don't see the man. They didn't see Jesus. They hear sounds, but they don't discern a voice. And so that's how you can work out this contradiction that unbelievers, it's amazing and kind of sad sometimes how I've met numerous unbelievers who have been more dedicated to reading the Bible in order to debunk it than sometimes we find Christians reading the Bible just in order to learn it. But there you go. So if it's confusing, why does this one say there's no sound? Why does this one say there is a sound? Well, again, that word sound, phonos, it's a bit ambiguous. You might write in your Bible there, chapter 22, verse 9, chapter 9, verse 7, and then you might write Revelation 1:15. I like that example where it says, you have the word phonos used twice in one verse, one place meaning sound and one place meaning voice. All right, but let's move on now. There's probably something way more edifying than just this work through. Verse 10, it says, "So I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, arise and go to Damascus, and there you will be told all things which you are appointed, or that are appointed for you to do." Is that as far as we're going to get today? Maybe I'll make this morning just a little shorter. I've got 8 children in my house, all under the age of 8. And I'm surprised that I was able to get here and have some peace and quiet to talk to you guys. So you'll notice what he does with Saul. And it's the same thing he does with Abraham. In Genesis chapter 12, when Abraham is called, he says, go to Canaan. Well, he doesn't make it to Canaan. He makes it to Haran. And you hear radio silence, and many, many years pass until Abraham's father dies. Then Abraham goes to Canaan. He finishes going where God told him to go, and then God speaks again. There's no record of God speaking to him between Ur the Chaldees and Canaan all those years until he finally went where God told him to go. So too, Saul is said to go to Damascus. Now, unlike Abraham, Saul ends up going straight to Damascus, and God meets with him there promptly. God will often tell you guys what you need to do. Sometimes it's a sin in your life. Sanctification is a process. God will reveal to us new things in our lives. And you can get old and gray-haired and think that, well, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't this, I don't that. And then Jesus starts to reveal to you, my friend, you're still a dirty sinner. I want you to work on your lovelessness. I want you to work on your charity. I want you to work on your pride or your greed or your anger. This morning, I didn't know it would tie in, but reading through McShane Bible Plan in Luke chapter 6, it's the Sermon on the Plain, which is very similar to the Sermon on the Mount, both of which are extremely convicting. If you really let those chapters, Matthew 5, 6, 7, Luke 6, you let those chapters do the work, and it'll rip you up as a Christian if you really read those things and treat it like the Lord's commands. And something I've always found intriguing and convicting about the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus says, you've heard it's been told those of old, but I say unto you. And he says things like, don't look with lust. And this is one of those key places we go to point to people like why pornography is wrong. It's because it's looking with lust. It's there where he talks about to hate is like murder, and that hatred is wrong. But I say unto you, that's the phrase that Jesus uses at the beginning of a command he's given. But then he also says, but I say unto you to bless those who curse you and pray for those who spitefully use you. And those are just as much commands as do not look with lust. And so it just reminded me that we might look down on the person who, quote unquote, struggles with pornography, but what about the person who struggles with lovelessness? What about the person who struggles with selfishness? These are all people struggling with sins. And God doesn't want us to have any of those things in our lives, and he's willing to work with us to get them out. But sometimes God will bring one thing to light. This is getting back to Saul here. Obedience. He brings something to light, and he really makes it evident to you. This is something that you need to work on in your life. And quite often, we don't like it. Maybe we'll put that on the shelf, and then we'll wonder why God's not speaking. We wonder why our prayer life is suffering. We wonder why I don't feel like I'm hearing from God. And well, it's because Saul, go to Damascus, and when you get there, I will give you further instructions. Abraham, go to Canaan. When you get there, I will give you further instructions. And so they say to you, brother, you need to repent of this sin in your life. And when you get there, maybe not perfection in performance, but in your heart, you know, like, yeah, I've truly called this sin. I have repented of it. I might still have it come back and try and bite me, but you know what? I am actively in a war against this sin, and I have burned bridges and cut ties and done what it's taken to practically fight against it. And then God will say, all right, here I am. Let's talk about the next thing we want to do together. And so Paul gets a command to go to Damascus, and he's obedient, and God continues to move in Paul's life. Some Christians seem to grow so very fast. I have no place to boast, but early in my walk, I felt like I really, I soaked up a lot of the word. I had great mentors. I had people who were really pushing me forward. But there was a season there, newly in love, where I would have done anything. And I grew so fast, and God continually moved and was speaking. Why? Because his wish was my command. And I listened, and he blessed it. And I've seen so many people wonder why they don't grow. But again, are we being obedient in those things he's told us? Or are we kind of obedient? Because partial obedience is another word for, there's a lag, so I'm hoping someone's going to post it. Partial obedience is another word for disobedience. 1 Samuel chapter 15, right? What is the bleating of those sheep I hear? Oh, I kept a couple of sheep alive. I'm going to sacrifice them to the Lord. No, Saul, other Saul, right? There was the obedient Saul, and there was the disobedient Saul, different Saul. And he lost his place as king and was cut off because he thought that he could give God, 90% or, 95%. And God was looking for 100%. Hey, I'll close on this. It'll be a blessing, I'm sure, for a few of you guys. This Sunday night, I am actually very excited. We're going to do a recap to prime us and get us ready to go back to 1 Kings at our church. And so I'm covering from Joshua through 2 Samuel. My hope is to have like a picture for every chapter. So hopefully it'll be a lot of pictures and a lot of stuff to just help us suck it all in and just kind of, put the whole section of that part of early church history or, Israel history into our minds. So it should be good. I love you guys. I will see you guys Sunday. Some of you see you online Sunday, Revival Church, a bunch of you. And otherwise, I will see you guys 7:30 a.m. Monday morning, Pacific time. Take care.